Good evening. I am Michelle Premack, a proud board member of the Israel Cancer Research Fund. On behalf of the entire organization and our Chicago event committee, we want to welcome all of you from around the country to our Let's Get Cooking with Chef Graham Elliot program. Tonight, all of you are supporting our Giving Tuesday, a national giving day, by participating in this event. Thank you. I want to especially thank Chef Elliot for devoting an hour of your time with us tonight to share some of your delicious recipes. I think we would all agree that this event is a great distraction from what is happening in our world. And we are all excited to have some new recipes and cocktails for the holidays. However, before we turn our screen over to Chef Elliot, I wanted to also give you a little background about the Israel Cancer Research Fund, as well as share a short video. ICRF's mission is to support the best and brightest scientists conducting groundbreaking cancer research in Israel. It all started in 1975 when a group of North American scientists and philanthropists recognized the extraordinary accomplishments of science in Israel and went to visit. During their visit, they walked away with two critical observations. Israeli scientists were leaving the country due to severe lack of funding, but more importantly, they recognized that there was an opportunity to prevent them from leaving by providing substantial financial support to those brilliant researchers so they would remain in Israel. Their vision became a reality. ICRF has grown exponentially over the decades, with our headquarters in New York City and chapters around North America. We have been able to award more than $72 million in funding and over 2,500 grants to hundreds of Israeli scientists who have conducted groundbreaking research. This short video shows the breadth and the depth of our work through the words of our scientists, Chicago board members, donors, and staff, including my own journey with breast cancer.
The first time I heard cancer, I was petrified.
I was stunned.
Terrified.
Shock, like utter shock.
My oldest brother came down with lymphoma cancer when he was 80. He beat it, but it came back as leukemia, and that finally got him at about the age of 85.
My dad told me that he had bladder cancer. So the cancer has touched me, as it has most other people, and unfortunately I was able to see it firsthand.
I just remember my mom hugging me and saying that she had diagnosed with cancer. You know, you didn't know if you had another month with your mom or another 10 years.
ICRF is very important to me and my family because I am a cancer survivor. My mom is a 2-time cancer survivor. My grandma battled cancer, my aunt battled cancer, and all of us hope that we can find a cure for cancer so that our children and our grandchildren do not have to face the same things that we have faced.
The day of my diagnosis, I couldn't even talk to my parents on the phone, and I don't think that I've ever heard my dad cry except for in that moment when my husband was telling him that it was actually cancer.
When Michelle first called and told us she had a lump in her breast, I'll never forget the moment. The shock never leaves you.
There's a reason that I'm here. There's a reason that I got cancer, because I shouldn't have. And I feel like it's my obligation now to do my part to find cures, because I've now lost 3 friends that are no longer here, and I feel that Israel holds the key to this research.
In 1975, a group of lay leaders, physicians, and scientists went to Israel for a mission to meet the fledgling scientist researchers in Israel. And they felt like these were the most brilliant minds, and they were leaving and fleeing because there was no funding for them to stay there.
A researcher might come to us with an idea for a study and get approved and get a funding grant. That funding grant from ICRF in Israel means that they'll be able to go to other organizations and tell them they got funded by ICRF and get more money for their research, because everyone knows that ICRF identifies the best studies out there and the best researchers out there.
I have been to Israel a number of times, so when you go there and you see for yourself that connectivity of who we are as a people, not so much as a religion, but as a people, in knowing what good you're doing, and again, those both pieces of the puzzle, which is cancer research in Israel at the same time, there's not only that personal satisfaction, but there's a lot of pride in that too. And I'm speaking right now, like I can feel it in my gut.
Some of the things that we've seen in terms of myeloma research and other types of cancer research has been dramatic, and it's made a difference. We hope that it continues to make a difference going forward.
And because of that, we as an organization are so proud, because we know that this is not helping everyone in the state of Israel, but a cancer breakthrough is going to help everybody worldwide.
My mother was a victim of cancer. People with that diagnosis many years ago, that might have meant 6 months to a year, but she had 5 years. The reason she had 5 years is because 10 or 20 years ago, someone like me made the decision to get involved with some organization for cancer research, and that led to drugs and treatments and ideas that gave her those 5 years. So Israel Cancer Research Fund means giving back to me.
The fact that I can be a part of something that is happening that could have this global impact is incredible.
I envision victory over cancer to be that my children and grandchildren never have to hear that diagnosis.
My research deals with the p53 tumor suppressor. Thank you, ICRF, for supporting my research.
My research focuses on elucidating the interactions between brain metastases and the microenvironment. Thank you, ICRF, for supporting my work.
I would like to take this opportunity and thank the ICRF for actually supporting me right at the beginning of my career.
My research is about NK cell killing tumor cells. Thank you, ICRF, for supporting my work.
Great minds working together can accomplish a lot more than great minds working alone. It's just absolutely necessary to continue this research.
Hi, I'm Zivit Blonder, also a proud Chicago board member. I hope you enjoyed the video and have a better understanding of the important work of ICRF. I am proud to be proud of this organization and appreciate all of you taking the time to hear about our mission. Now, let's get cooking. Tonight, I have the privilege of introducing the amazing chef, Graham Elliot. Chef Elliot is an award-winning chef, television personality, cookbook author, and he has received many James Beard Foundation nominations. At age 27, Chef Elliot was the youngest 4-star chef to be named in any major US city. He opened his own restaurant, Graham Elliot, which became one of 15 restaurants in the US to be awarded 2 Michelin stars. Chef Elliot has aired on MasterChef and MasterChef Junior. He was a full-time judge on Bravo's Top Chef, and he also hosted the digital series Going Off the Menu, and most recently was on ABC's new series, Family's Food Fight. Chef Elliot lives in Chicago with his wife and their 3 sons. He has taught his sons the importance of giving back by leading by example and being an active member of our community. Before I hand it over to Chef Elliot, one housekeeping item. All of you will remain muted during the cooking expedition, but if you have questions, and yes, Chef Elliot encouraged you very much to ask, please use the chat function at the bottom of your screen. Please share your name and state with your question, and without further ado, let's raise our glasses and welcome Chef Graham Elliot.
So as we said, I am Graham Elliot. I am a chef based here in Chicago. And also I wanted to introduce my wife, Allie, who is going to be here assisting. So she'll be jumping in and out as needed. So I really do, first and foremost, on this special Tuesday, want to give a shout out to ICRF and everything that they do. I'm humbled to be part of this. At the end of the day, you know, all I know how to do is cook and get my hands dirty and kind of dirty up the kitchen. So, you know, this is something that I think will be fun for all of us. As we mentioned at the beginning, please, let's make this a nice communal thing. Let's all be able to talk, share, have fun. Any questions you have, any comments, throw them out there. Because at the end of the day, you know, yes, it's virtual, but you are in my home, and, you know, this should be a good time. So first thing that I'm going to do is the sweet potato Lackeys, and I'm doing that with like a little pear compote. And I love when you can almost close your eyes and taste something and know what season it is. And obviously here in Chicago, it's this November, it's cold, and you've got things like root vegetables and sweet potatoes and apples and pears. So I decided, well, you know, what grows together goes together. Let's do this. So you're gonna see like a nice, almost sweet and sour pear compote. And we're gonna do some scallion instead of the traditional onion. We're gonna crisp them up, and we'll go ahead and get started with that. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the pears going. The other thing that I think is really fun with cooking is kind of the way that I guess you can say I live my life, which is I don't feel that things are black and white as much as, you know, they're gray. So it's open to interpretation. So even though maybe your grandma made this dish a certain way, or when you go to a restaurant, you always order it, you know, in this style, I think to be able to step back and say, okay, well, obviously it's been done that way for so long, but how can I put my spin on it? How can I make it my own? And, you know, what can we do different to push the envelope? So, you know, sure, there's signature items and traditional type of family recipes, but I do think it's fun to kind of go and make them your own. So we're just taking off the flesh on the outside of these pears. Again, you can do apples, you could do, you know, really any kind of fruit. You know, I think in the summertime, it'd be fun to do something with, you know, stone fruit like peaches or nectarines, stuff like that. That could be really nice. Generally, when you're going to be doing something like apples, pears, even avocado, you know, they can start to brown because they're oxidizing. And if we were going to be, you know, having to prep a ton of these or use them later, then we would want to acidulate them where you kind of have some water and lemon juice. But because we're going to go ahead and throw this like right in the pan, there's really no need to do that. So just kind of cutting them. And another thing, I'm sure, you know, if you guys think about it, right, cooking is taking something raw and applying heat to it and, you know, making it cooked. So you don't want to overthink things, because I think a lot of times when you do that, you know, you start getting stressed out, like, well, it says to add 1 teaspoon of this or 1/4 cup of that. And once you start having to measure and, you know, get freaked out almost, it takes away a lot of the fun. So even things like knife work, like what we're doing here, you're really just cutting these into a uniform shape. So they can be small, they can be large, they can, you know, really whatever your preference is, as long as they're uniform, because that way they'll cook evenly. You know, you won't have a giant chunk that's raw and then a small piece that's overcooked.
Chef Graham, we have a couple of questions already.
Great.
A couple about the pears. Can you use Basque pears? And what about canned pears?
Sure. Yeah. Basque pears, Anjou pears, really any kind you want. I guess for me, I love not just the flavor of ingredients, but the texture. So, you know, obviously canned pears, if you want, definitely use them. Just dry them really, really well. And then remember that because they're pretty much pre-cooked, you're only going to want to cook them down in the pan for a little bit. You're not going to stew them too long. Otherwise, you'll kind of make like a pear applesauce texture, which again, if you wanted, you could totally do that. Like we could stew these down for a long time and mash them and almost do like a pear sauce, if you would.
And Debbie from Chicago wants to know, how small a dice are you doing? And are you, Susan wants to know if you're keeping the skin on the pears or peeling them.
I am keeping, you can see here now. So I've diced, you know, just about this size here. And we're going to leave the skin on. Again, I like things, you know, with some texture. Obviously the sweet potato we're peeling because those kind of, you know, they cook differently, and also the flavor. But with a pear, the skin is so thin that it's not going to be, you know, something where you eat it and there's like that nasty, firm, chewy kind of part that you're dealing with. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and leave that on. So now I've got my pan. I've got some butter in it. You can see it's just some melted butter, not too high. I'm going to go ahead and bring my board over to here. Get my pears tossed in. Get that back. Then I'll start stirring these up. And with cooking, what's great about cooking is that you're using all the senses, not just how it tastes, you know, how, you know, it's salty, it's sweet, it's sour, but also texture. And in the kitchen, it's also sound. So right now, if I listen, I can tell that my pan is not as hot as I want it to be. So I'm turning it up. You know, if you threw something into a smoking hot pan, you'll smell the smoke, you'll see the smoke, but you'll also hear things like scorching in that pan. So same thing, if it's too cold, you put it in and it almost sounds like it's just kind of steaming, and we don't want that either. So controlling heat is something that's very, very important in the kitchen, regardless really of what you're making. So I got those stewing down right now. While that's happening, I'm going to go ahead and start grating the sweet potato. So this is a good time if you guys have some questions to go ahead and throw them out there. So again, you can do any kind of potato, right? Everyone's got regular white potatoes. You've got Yukon Gold, sweet potatoes, purple potatoes, and they're each going to provide their own flavor profile, but also starch content. And when you're making these, I think it's important to remember that if there's a lot of natural starch, then to use a small amount of flour to bind them together. Whereas
Chef, we have sorry to interrupt, we have a couple of questions. What heat do you want the pears on?
So the pears are on like medium low. So not super low, because then again, they're not really gonna get much color, and color is flavor because, you know, it's those natural sugars caramelizing. So we have them on medium, and you can kind of see right now over here at the stove. You can see and you can hear. So they're not searing, they're not, you know, getting too caramelized, but they are going to kind of stew down. They're on a medium heat. And now I'm going to go ahead and add about a tablespoon or so of honey. I'll just pour this guy in here. And a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. And now if you were going to be cooking this down, you know, if you were going to do, you know, a piece of foie gras that's seared off, or you're going to do, you know, a raw piece of fish, something like that, a lot of times you'll see a sauce called a gastrique, and that really is equal parts acid and sugar cooked down. So, you know, something that's going to be really nice and tart with a little bit of sweetness that pairs well with that. So for here, because we're, you know, going to be doing some of the frying, I think the honey and cider vinegar is going to add just a little kick to the pears that's going to really make it pop.
Okay, we have a couple of questions about the potatoes. Lorraine from Connecticut wants to know, what about using a food processor? And Ross wants to know, sweet potato or yams, doesn't matter.
Sweet potato or yams, yeah, it could be either one. And you can use a food processor. my thing is with COVID and the gyms being closed, any excuse to kind of like, get the guns worked out, I'm going to go for. So I'm doing them by hand.
We have another comment from Rob in New York. Graham, I love hot stuff. What's your position on jalapenos and Lackeys?
Ooh, I love it. I think that especially when you're doing like sour cream or something on it, that'll balance out that heat. So yeah, I'm all for that. Never done it though.
Okay, and then Roberta in Florida wants to know, what size are you using on the box grater?
Oh, so I was starting on the small, but it's almost looking like it's getting into puree form where it's releasing too much water. So I went with the larger side here. So you can kind of see some of the texture in there now. So I'll go with this. I'll start to kind of, you can see now also over here on the pears. It smells amazing. So as soon as you get that iPhone smelling app downloaded, you guys are going to be in good shape. All right, so now I'm just kind of coating the sweet potato in the egg, because that egg and the natural starch that came out as you were grating it, that'll kind of help give it that natural binding, and it'll lead us to decide how much of the flour we want to add. So I got that. Now I'm going to start adding a little bit of this flour in intervals. And again, I think it's important to, I know I keep going back to this, but like not focusing too much on the quote unquote recipe, because sure, it's a good guideline, it's a good blueprint, but whoever made a recipe that said add 2 sweet potatoes and 1 cup of flour, their sweet potatoes might have been at a different time of year. They might have been a different varietal of sweet potato. So, maybe we have to add half the amount of flour. Maybe we need to add twice the amount. And at the end of the day, you're the one that's cooking it, so you can't blame the recipe. So it's the same thing. If a recipe says, okay, bake a cake, put it in at 350 for an hour, your oven's 350 might be my oven's 425, just because how things are calibrated. So again, I think if you just kind of step back and think of cooking as something that's really easy, that people have done for thousands and thousands of years, then you're going to be in a better spot.
So we have a couple more questions.
Yep.
Is there a way to make the latke vegan, no egg?
Yeah, you could. I think that the egg is going to just give it a little more body, and also, not necessarily hold it together more, but make it a little more cakey, if you will. Because, just like you're tossing things in egg, like we'll do with the Kugel, and bake that off, it gives it that binding. You could do a little more flour. You don't have to do the egg. So.
Oh, we have a lot more questions.
Great.
Emily,
I'm going to just cut up some scallions now.
Okay. Emily from Chicago wants to know, I have a theory that grating it fine so the water comes out is actually good, makes the oil jump less, and a crisp latke. What do you think? What am I doing to the latke, taking the water out, that I don't realize I am doing?
No, well, definitely if you take the water out, right, then that's what's going to react with the oil. So less is going to equal less popping. But what I'm going to do is almost the same thing, but, grating it into a smaller, grain or piece, if you will, of the sweet potato. It depends on if you want the texture or if you want, the flavor, because I guess you would have a little more of that sweet potato flavor coming through the smaller the cut. So the fact for me is I'm going to make these, and then I'm going to press out as much of the moisture as I can, and then I will go ahead and cook those off. So we're still going to lose the water that could possibly be popping, and not just popping, but remember, when you put water into a pan when you're cooking something, it's going to lose the caramelization, and instead it's going to start steaming. which we don't want.
So we have a couple more questions. We have a lot of people cooking along. So
Oh, great.
Did you
You got
stop
salt and
cooking?
pepper.
Did you stop cooking the pears yet? And did you add the flour yet? And how many eggs and how much flour?
Okay, so I did 2 eggs and I did a third a cup of flour, and I do have the pears finished now, and you can see this. Here they are. If you can bring this down. So here they are, and you can see that they're almost glazed and they're holding up almost together. So it's not a jam, it's not a puree. They still have their shape, but they are a little more toothsome, and they have a great sweet sour flavor profile going on. So I'm going to grab a plate real fast, and then I'm going to start kind of shaping these guys up.
And do we need to add water?
No, you can add water if you want, but for my pears, because they were soft enough, then they don't need any additional moisture because it kind of leaches out as you cook them. But I guess if you had a really, really firm pear, then you could definitely add some water to help the cooking process. But anytime you're adding water, it's kind of taking away from the flavor.
So we have a couple more questions. What about the onion? Do we add the Spanish onion? And did you use the white part of the scallion or just the green?
I did the green of the onion. I'm actually, after seasoning the sweet potato, it brings out some of the water. So I'm actually going to add a little more of the flour. So again, this is why you kind of go back, you adjust, you check. So I'm just kind of incorporating, I'm mixing a little. And set that aside.
And when do you season with salt and pepper? Susie wants to know.
Yep, I did that just about a minute or so ago. So remember, you can always go back and season at the end, like when they're out of the pan, but you want to season kind of every step of the way. So that's what I did. I just did a little salt and pepper so that every bite's getting seasoning, not just on the outside, but also on the inside with every bite. But like I said, if you tasted one, it's better to err on the, it's a little under seasoned, so we can add a little bit of the sea salt or something at the end versus it's so salty, now I got to redo this whole thing. And you don't want to get into that boat.
And Chef Pam from Chicago wants to know, are we adding scallions to the potatoes now or later? And Jill in Highland Park wants to know, what consistency is the potato mix?
So this is the potato mix right now. I'm going to try and fry one off and make sure that it's good, but this is what we're looking at. So you can almost do as they call a quenelle. So you can see that's the kind of texture we're looking at. And I did add the scallion already. So that's what the mix is as we speak.
And then Jean wants to know, what pots and pans do you like?
It's weird when it comes to knives and pots and pans. Chefs a lot of times, I don't know. It's not that they're not brand loyal, but we're kind of looking like for whatever pan's going to get you from A to Z pretty quickly. So I like all-clad. I also like Calphalon, but there's just a million different types out there. So it's really whatever you're feeling most comfortable with.
Okay, a couple more questions.
Yep.
Kay Ellen, what about the pears? And are you preheating a pan for Lackeys? And Debbie wants to know, our potato mix is a bit watery. Do you press the water out before frying?
Yes, press the water out. And then also if you need to add any more of the to the any more flour to help bind it, you can do that.
And a few people are curious about the pears when they get added.
So the pears are just going to be put on top. So they've already been cooked off now. So they are going to be good to go. So I started off the dish. I started off the demo cooking those first because they would take a little bit longer. So I'm going to put these Lackeys in now and see how we're doing.
And Ben wants to know, when you have a minute in between all the cooking and describing, what are your favorite Chicago restaurants?
Oh man, it's a loaded question. Got so many chef friends. I always think, you know, GT Fish and Oyster, Boca, Publican. A lot of those restaurants are really great ones. I also like RPM. I think they do great stuff. I just went to ABBA. That was amazing.
Oh, we have a couple more questions.
Yep.
Joe in Des Plaines, how many Lackeys do you think this batch will make? And are you frying with a nonstick pan?
I am frying with a nonstick pan, and let's see, I have 3 right here. I bet that this will make a dozen Lackeys.
And how high should the heat be? And is the oil in the pan? What oil are you using? And we have Brittany wants to know, I've never shaped them on a separate surface before. I just plop them straight in the pan. Can you explain why you shape them on a cutting board first?
Yeah, I was just shaping them so that I could make sure that they're cooking evenly and getting the, you know, a nice consistent look to them. So obviously, you know, you can do the old plop in the pan type of technique. Whatever you're most comfortable with. But I just wanted to make these, you know, almost the same way that I would do like a crab cake or, you know, salmon cake or something like that.
And how high is the heat in?
So the heat right now, I would bet the oil's at around 365. So you can kind of take a peek at the flame and see this is about how high we're at. So not a roaring fire, but remember, especially with oil, that if you are cooking at too low of a temp, the Lackey is going to just absorb that oil and it's going to just get greasy and, you know, almost a boiled effect, which obviously we do not want. We want some nice crispy action going on.
So we have a few more comments and questions. So thanks for the shout out to Abba, says the Jacobs family. And then Emily wants to know, how often do chefs replace nonstick pans? After a while, the nonstick kind of wears off, right?
Well, I think the nonstick wears off if you are, you know, maybe scraping it and things like that. But for me, I guess I have one larger nonstick pan. As soon as it's done being used, I set it aside, let it cool, and then I wash it and wipe it out. Same thing, I have a small, maybe 6-inch for eggs. Those are the ones that, especially in restaurants, you go through a lot more. So probably every 6 months or so, you might want to get a new one. But again, that's more of a commercial thing. So I don't know, maybe once a year, you can kind of switch your pans out.
Okay, Susan from Ohio. Oh, sorry to interrupt.
Sorry,
Susan from
I'm just going to
Ohio.
let you know. Yeah, go ahead.
Susan from Ohio wants to know, what kind of oil are you using? And Candace, how long do you cook on each side?
So I cook for about, I guess, 2.5 minutes on each side. and I'm blotting them now. I took them out, and I was just using canola oil. So we've got these guys here. You can take a look. Again, just make sure you're blotting them. I'm going to hit them with a little salt just as they come out, because that's when the salt's going to stick to them the best. So we got those, and then we can just kind of lay them like so. And then if you want, right, you can do a little bit of sour cream or creme fraiche or even Greek yogurt, depending on what you feel like pairing it with. And then go back and just, again, take a scallion and go back and just kind of slice it on the bias. And I always say you want to kind of plate the food like you were walking in the forest and just stumbled on it. So it's not like tweezers and making sure it looks super, super fussy, but just nice and natural and beautiful. So this would be my interpretation, which is a sweet potato Lacke with the scallion, the sour cream, and then of course, a little bit of the pears to give it some of that that sweet and sour flavor and tie in the season. So,
and we have a couple of questions. Kay Ellen, what if they are not staying together? Hers seem to be falling apart a little bit.
Yep. So if you, here, I'll show you these again. So you can definitely just try to press out as much water as you can, and then add the flour until you get to the consistency where when you kind of put it together and hold it, or like we did that little spoon trick, that it's not falling apart into the individual pieces. It's kind of holding as a cake, if you will.
So we have another comment from a Terry Herbstman, who is very excited to see you. She got to cook with you over 13 years ago at the Peninsula.
Oh, wow.
And she wants to know, how essential is the copper core for pots and pans? Any preferences on cast iron skillets versus enameled skillets? And does it make a huge difference, or it really depends on what you are making? Would you recommend one more for Lackeys?
You know, I always would go cast iron, you know, for whatever the thing you're cooking. I love the history of it, the fact that a lot of times it's almost handed down through generation. You know, it's just a beautiful piece of cookware. For here, you know, I did the non-stick for that, but you could easily fill up the oil and cook them in there. And as far as, you know, copper, and I mean, copper is the best because it conducts heat more evenly. They're, you know, if you're gonna spring for some nice pans and pots, then definitely go the copper route. What's funny is I can show you right here hanging up. I have my tiny little cast iron, and I've got my my copper pot sets as well. So we're just not using them today for this demo, but just funny that we just touched on that. So any other questions for the Lackeys before we move into the Kugel?
Well, we have a comment. Mark and Debbie from Skokie said that was an amazing combination of flavors, came out great, used less oil. So awesome.
Awesome, great. So now I'm going to go ahead and start our next dish, and you can kind of see what I'm doing. You can do, these are almost the same mushroom, right? So you have a cremini, which is almost like your little button, you know, or baby portobello, and then your giant version of that. So portobello, you know, I think that it's great. Obviously, the flavor is awesome, but the biggest part is just the texture. I think the fact that you have a mushroom that is so naturally meaty, you know, it's just, again, it's like Mother Nature just keeps on giving. So I'm cutting these. If you wanted, you could take your portobello. Sometimes people do this. If you flip it on its back, you can go and kind of remove the gills. If you know, sometimes maybe it makes it a little less dirty or muddy, if you will, when you're cooking with them. I love the flavor, I love the color, but sometimes in the restaurant, what we'll do is save all of these, make a mushroom stock, or if you cook a bunch of garlic, onions, and these and puree them, it makes like a beautiful black mushroom puree, which I think is really nice. So up to you, just throwing it out there.
And we have a whole bunch more delicious comments about the Lackeys. Even Lisa from Chicago said her 17-year-old says it's delicious.
Oh my goodness, that's awesome. We all know how hard it is to get 17-year-olds to give shout outs to chefs. So thank you. So got my mushroom set aside. Now I've got my onion here. I'm just gonna kind of go slice them nice and thin. I think onion and garlic are like the two coolest ingredients because, you know, I feel like no matter where you are on the planet, every culture seems to use them in their food, you know, and you use them in different ways. But, you know, the fact that you can start a dish off, little oil or a little butter, sweat them down, they turn, you know, almost to like a beautiful sugar type of ingredient in the pan. I really, really love it. So if you see, we're almost equal parts of the mushroom and onion. And then I've got some garlic.
And chef, what temperature should the oven be on for the Kugel?
I have it at 350. Now I've got
we have another shout out for the drink is delicious.
Awesome. The food tastes better the more of them you drink. So have at it. All right, garlic chopping up. Hope people are following along. I hope that we're doing this together. It's a good bonding experience, which a lot of us have been, you know, sadly missing out on with this crazy, crazy year. I'm gonna throw in some of my oil. Yes. Yep. So obviously, if you wanted, you could be cooking it, putting it right in as it's warm, as it's coming out. But for time's sake, things like having the onions peeled, the garlic already, you know, pulled out of its little skin, things like that, I figured it would make more sense. So yes, I just cooked these off. So they're right here right now. And you'll see here, we're gonna throw in, I've got my oil. Also, I think butter, when you're cooking mushrooms and onion, just makes everything better. So I'm going to throw in some of this as well.
So a couple of questions. Do we dice the onions, and how big a pan are you using?
So I did my onions basically this shape. So I peeled them, cut them in half, and then just went back and sliced like that. I minced up the garlic, and I kind of diced up the mushroom. And now with my pan, I've got a nice large pan here, a lot of surface area. I've got it now on high. I'm gonna go ahead and throw in the mushrooms, onions, and the garlic. We'll get these kind of stirred around. And you can see those mushrooms are like sponges, you know? they immediately start absorbing that butter and oil. So after a minute or two, go back, take a look and see if you want to add some more fat to the pan. Obviously, you don't want to boil them in that. You don't want them to get greasy, but you do want to make sure that they're getting some color and they're not sticking and stuff like that. So you can take a look at that now. Throwing a little more of that butter around here. Got my salt. And what's interesting is with the salt here, it's not only adding flavor, but it pulls out moisture as you cook. So you'll see it starting to almost steam, which helps cook it a little more evenly. So I know that you can do a sweet or savory version of this dish. I figured obviously, you know, with the sweet potato and the pear and everything with the Lackeys, it, you know, made a little more sense to almost have that as like your app, and then this is the larger portion entree. So I'm going a little more savory with the Kugel. These are getting cooked down. You can see that the onions are getting nice and soft. It smells incredible. All right, what questions do we have? What are you guys cooking for your holidays? What are we thinking for going into 2021? Is everyone optimistic? This is us cooking and hanging out together. So obviously for an amazing cause. So please shoot out any questions, comments that you have. It's only so exciting to watch the onions and mushrooms cook in the pan.
We have a couple of questions.
All right.
Just back to the Latkes. Jean says, I have a lot of Latkes here and just 2 of us. Can I freeze them? And then a few more shout outs for how delicious the Latkes were. Now the questions are coming in. What cutting board brand is that? Which chef knives do you recommend? Somebody wants to have some advice on beef Wellington.
Beef Wellington, wow. That came out of left field. All right, so with the Lackeys, yeah, you can, I guess if you wanted, you could fry them, freeze them, but when you redo them, they might be a little soggy. So what I would probably do if I had some of the leftover mixture and there was only myself or 2 people, I would bag up the mixture and freeze that. And that way, when you take it out, let it thaw for a day or so in the fridge, then you can scoop it out of the bag, maybe hit it with a little more flour on the outside and fry those up. So you can freeze the mix. So I'm going to turn the heat off now for my onion and mushroom.
So
set that pan aside.
I'm going to ask a couple of questions for the people who are cooking. Did you add pepper? And let's see, do you use regular table salt or kosher salt?
So I did use pepper, and I do use kosher salt for a lot of things, but for this, just because we're making a small amount, I have my Himalayan rock salt and my black peppercorns. But every time before you use spices, including black pepper, make sure you toast them off. You put them in a pan, low heat, cook them for about 10 minutes. All of the essential oils and that flavor comes out, and it basically means you can use half as much as you would generally because it's so much more pungent. So very important to toast those things off. So I'm going to add the eggs now to my egg noodles. Just going to toss those so that they're nice and evenly coated.
And Sue from Rye, New York wants to know, what do you like to cook with your children? Any favorite dishes that are quick and easy?
I think we've been doing a lot of pasta lately, but also using the slow cooker. So my wife's been making pot roast and, you know, braised pork, things, you know, chicken, stuff like that. So it's fun when you do those one pot dishes because you can throw in your meat, you can get a sauce from it. You've got potato and veggies. And especially this time of year, I think it's a good opportunity to teach kids this different food, and maybe not even just total different dishes, but ingredients. So you go to the store, the market, and say, okay, let's get a couple of veggies. What do we want? And if you're doing a one pot dish, you can do all the root vegetables. You've got, you know, celery root, you got parsnips, carrots, rutabagas, turnips, you know, all these beautiful things that look cool, they're fun, they're different. And when your kids see the shape and the colors and then get to help prep it, I think they'll enjoy it that much more.
So we have a couple of questions about what you're cooking right now. So Leanne wants to know, what is the consistency of the onions and mushrooms supposed to end up as? And then Ellen wants to know, what is going into the noodles?
So I just tossed the noodles with the egg to coat them. And then I have added the mushroom and onion, and you can kind of see right here, this is the texture that we have. So kind of like this melty onion mushroom consistency. And then I'm just tossing it all together, and I'm going to put it in the pan, and then I'm going to throw it in the oven for almost an hour at 375.
And Rob wants to know, are you concerned about the restaurant business going forward?
Ron, I am concerned about every business going forward, every person going forward. It is a crazy, crazy time. And, you know, everyone is doing what they have to do, right? Like pivoting, things like that. So you see a lot of carry out, delivery stuff, you know, stuff that people never thought they were going to have to do when they got into this line of work. But I think of all the different lines of work that are similar to cooking. You have music, you have theater, you have, you know, all different performance arts, things like that. And they're all up in the air, you know, even up in the air. Like think of flying. Nobody's doing that right now, really. So it's interesting. But what I always think of, whether you're in LA, New York, DC, Chicago, wherever, every part of the world is going through the same thing right now. So I feel that we're going to come out of it stronger and better for it as a people. And, you know, I hope that that's not just me dreaming, but I really do hope that, you know, we look back and realize that we're here for a really short amount of time. And this will be one bump that we all look back on collectively and say, like, man, can you remember 2020? Like, that was just insane. And thank goodness that we're all here now together. So I really do, you know, think that if we can try to learn from it and realize, yeah, we're locked in, but we're locked in with loved ones. We're locked in being able to take advantage of time with maybe our kids or our parents, grandparents, spouses. You know, it makes you think about it a little differently. So
we have
basically that's my longest possible answer on the restaurant business.
So getting back to the recipes, we have a couple of questions. How many eggs? What about the paprika? When do we add that? And the parsley? And
so
in the 350 oven, how long is it in for?
So I just took this guy out. He's been in there for about an hour, and I'm topping him with the parsley and some paprika on top. And you can see, pretty warm, but this is what we're looking at. So that's the roasted mushroom, caramelized onion, the obviously the egg noodle, paprika, salt, pepper, and parsley. And that is pretty much all she wrote. So, whew. And then that's the, again.
So was the oven 350 or 375?
Mine was at 350.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can we
and again,
prepare
I mean, if you wanted it,
Oh.
if you wanted it 375, it's just going to give you more of that crunchy noodle on the top. It's not really going to affect the cooking all the through of the dish. It's just going to, you know, again, that crunch on top. So it depends on if you're a texture person or not.
And Leanne wants to know, can we prepare it and refrigerate it and cook it tomorrow? And Jill asks convection or bake. And Lorna asks, is that a 9 by 13?
This is a, wow, what does it look like? I don't know, maybe 6 by 10? Yeah, I think it's about a 6 by 10, but you can definitely make it and then cook it tomorrow. That's no problem. Or I'm gonna have some tonight and then have it tomorrow for leftovers. So yeah, either way. But that's pretty much it. So those are our 2 dishes, and any other questions or comments, I would be more than happy to answer. I'm just gonna tidy up because a clean kitchen is a happy kitchen.
Okay, and when did the egg go in?
So once I had the noodles done, I took the eggs, mixed them, and then poured them over the egg noodle, tossed that together, and then put in the onion mushroom mix, tossed all that. So it kind of coated the egg noodle, those eggs did.
And let's see, I never made that much food so fast, says Debbie. Thank you. And can we get the recipes? And a few people have asked that. So yes, we're going to send everybody the recipes tomorrow.
Yep.
And Laura wants to know, what would you put in a sweet Kugel?
Oh, wow. I'm trying to think, like, I guess you can, I've seen ricotta or something of that nature, but also cinnamon, maybe raisins, maybe, and I know that that's a touchy subject. It's just like rice pudding in my family, whether we put raisins in things or not. But, you know, I think apple, things like that, you know, I would totally, again, deciding on the season, that's the things that are available right now, so.
And then how would smoked paprika taste on top of the Kugel, or do you prefer sweet? And a few people have asked, how long does a Kugel cook for?
So mine cooked for just about an hour. And paprika, I think the smoked paprika is fine. It's can not be overpowering, but I mean, it definitely takes it up to that next level. So I'm just using the sweet paprika, a little milder, but to each their own, right? Again, no right or wrong when it comes to this kind of stuff.
And we have so many comments saying thank you and wonderful and everything's delicious.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Again, this is what it's all about. I'm making sure we're zooming up on the hat here. So I'm cooking, but cooking for a reason and for a cause. So I hope everybody is still in that giving spirit and realizes what it's all about. So thank you again for letting me contribute what I know and for being part of something greater. And again, I want to thank my wife, Allie, here. So any questions, comments, let us know.
And then we have Lamore Katz, who's gonna close us out. Thank you so much, Chef. And here comes Lamore.
Take it away, Lamore.
Hi, everybody. Okay, so thank you everyone for joining us this evening and participating in this non-caloric and fun evening. And a special delicious thank you to Chef Graham Elliot. Today is Giving Tuesday, and Graham, you have given us a wonderful gift, sharing your exceptional talent and your affable personality. In your honor, Graham, I wore my special glasses. You pleased our palates and you lifted our spirits, and you definitely made us happy. So thank you. And for you out there, if you love this event, please remember that our ultimate goal is raising funds for Israel Cancer Research Fund. Our scientists continue with their unrelenting research to find cures for cancer. When you receive your post-event thank you, please consider donating to our cause. Thank you, happy holidays, and good night, everyone.